welcome back to our third interview. Today we have with us Samantha, who's currently doing her PhD in computer science at Northeastern. Before we get into the interview questions, Samantha, can you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Samantha, and I graduated Georgetown class of 2022 with a math and computer science degree. And as Roma said, I am now a PhD student first year at Northeastern doing a computer science PhD where I'm focused mostly on ethics and computer science.
That sounds really interesting. So I guess my first question to you is when deciding on your career path, and what you envision yourself doing after college, what were some pivotal moments that led you to where you are now?
Yeah, so I've always been pretty good at math, and I've loved it since I was a kid. I would say that I was like definitely that person early elementary school who played a lot of puzzle games. Not that that's like required for a STEM degree, but it's something I always was interested in, and I genuinely thought I would be in math. So I came into Georgetown with a declared with a math major, and I kind of picked up comp sci randomly, thinking that it would be a useful skill. And I knew pretty early on that I would want to do some sort of math master's or some sort of graduate program, but it really was a last minute decision, pretty much as last minute as it could have gotten for me to go into a computer science PhD. It was right before application started, actually, but the summer before my senior year, where I really found that problem that I was interested in and passionate about. And again, it really had to do with ethics, with gender, with demographics and how that's represented in STEM. And because I was able to find that problem, it led me towards a PhD program in computer science. And it was really happenstance, to be honest with you. It was kind of random. I fell into it, but I am happy that I figured it out. So I really had no idea that I would be here if you were to ask me even 3 years ago. So it's kind of
That's
an exciting and new thing.
right. That's great. Um, I guess a different question related to this. What were some like obstacles or barriers that you felt you had faced? Like, I guess one perhaps would be like kind of like stepping into this like last minute, but just like throughout college in general, maybe like what were just some obstacles that you faced?
Yeah, for sure. I think that imposter syndrome for me is a huge component. I also, and so along with that, just feeling like I have to prove myself and really fight for my place. I was lucky enough at Georgetown and in high school to have relatively balanced gender in my classrooms, which was a huge plus. But there were a handful of classes, particularly in the higher levels. So in high school, my BC Calc class, there were 3 girls out of 35 students. And then most recently, my junior and senior classes for machine learning and artificial intelligence at Georgetown were very male heavy. And one thing that was a really interesting observation was that most of the top performers in the class were women. And I think that really speaks to a shared feeling we all had of feeling like we had to fight to be there. And so that was definitely something that put a lot of pressure on me in high school and college, that level of perfectionism, that need to prove myself. And, it's very much a mental barrier, but it's also a societal barrier. So I would say those are the hardest things. And, on paper, maybe you don't see that, but it is something that I know I struggled with a lot, and that a lot of my friends who were pursuing the same path also struggled with.
That definitely makes sense. Um, yeah, I myself went to a STEM magnet high school, and the gender disparity was extreme.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to yourself 4 to 5 years ago when you were just starting college?
I wish I told myself to relax a little bit, to be honest. I know that it really was hard to deal with that imposter syndrome and that perfectionism. And I think telling myself to be more confident, that I deserve to be there, that you're smart, you're doing great. I think first of all that. So keep that in the back of your mind the whole time. If it's something that you enjoy, you can do it. That's fine. You don't have to, feel like you have to fight to be there. The second piece of advice I would probably give is just to try a whole lot of new things. I think that I got very lucky and found my path because of the different activities I tried and fell into. So I had like a data science internship, for example, between my sophomore and junior years. And that was a really pivotal moment for me because the only thing I knew for a fact about my career was that I didn't want to do research, which is really funny given that I've ended up in a PhD program where I'm going to be doing research probably for the rest of my life. And the way I got there, kind of weaving through the trees, was I had the data science internship and realized, hey, this stuff kind of is problem solving research-esque, but I really enjoy it. And I randomly applied very, very last minute to Georgetown's Massive Data Institute and did a little bit of research there during my junior year just to try it out, only to realize it wasn't all that much different. And I loved it. And so just if I had closed myself off to opportunities like that because I didn't think I wanted to do it, I never would have ended up here. And it was most definitely the correct choice. So try a whole lot of stuff, don't close doors, be confident. And then I guess one other thing that kind of ties those threads together is don't self-select. I think it's very common when you're fighting that imposter syndrome and that need to fight to be there, that you close doors for yourself because you don't think that you'll make it. But I
Right.
mean, it's totally worth submitting that application, submitting that job interview, sending that email, whatever. Uh, you're not the one who should close that door for yourself because you deserve to be there.
That's really good advice. Thank you. So can you talk a little more about like how you applied for like your internships, like for like research opportunities, and like what were some key activities that you participated in during college, and if any were like particularly like competitive, like internships, how did you go about finding them? And
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think one of the most helpful things for me in college was forming good relationships with my professors because they have a lot of connections. They have people they can introduce you to, they can help get you in the door, they can write those recommendation letters. So whether that's going to office hours or at least the STEM majors, so both computer science and math had um, various programming events where we could go and hang out and get to know the professors and each other. And sometimes it felt like a lot of effort to go to those, but it was nice to not only build that community, but also to um, come up with that group of advocates who are willing to help you find those positions. So that was critical for me, not only as I was applying for internships, but also once I decided to apply for grad school, I had those recommenders. And it having those advocates not only for reading over my resume or proofreading my statements of purpose and stuff like that, they were ridiculously helpful. To be honest, it was one of the best things knowing that I had that support system that I was able to build myself through going to get to know these professors, talking with them after class, and talking about shared interests. So that helped get a foot in the door, but it also helped a lot when trying to figure out my interests. So if there was a class I thought was particularly interesting, it was helpful to go talk with that professor and think about, all right, well, if I wanted to try and do a little bit more of this, is there like a particular job role or title that you might recommend? So that was very helpful. And then just being, again, a self-advocate, sending lots of emails. It's not bothering a recruiter at a competitive job if you're sending them emails, asking them questions. I mean, that's their job. But I think a lot of people who aren't necessarily as confident um, might not take that extra step to send that email, introduce themselves, say, "Hi, I'm Samantha. I'm really interested in this. Do you have any advice for me, or do you have 30 minutes to meet?" So that was something that took a lot of effort for me to do, but was something that I learned to do throughout my college career, and it really made all the difference in the world by the time I got to applying for my graduate programs. And then once I got to the application cycle, it kind of all fell into place. I had formed a strong enough relationship with my advisor, who also, by the way, is a woman in STEM. She taught me so much, but I had formed a strong enough relationship with her that she was able to really help me not only pick my schools, so create my school list, but send personal emails to her friends and at the school to help get my foot in the door. And a lot of my interviews were with people my advisor knew. And that in and of itself was kind of a hard thing for me to wrap my head around because it almost felt like nepotism a little bit, if you will. But it's not. It's because I put in the work to really form that relationship with my advisor. And she cared about me enough to really tell other people that I was great and I deserved to be there. So forming those relationships is not something to underestimate.
That's really good advice. Um, can you also talk a little more about like some important activities or internships or clubs that you were part of that you felt were like really important um in developing your career, I guess.
Definitely. So I hinted at it a little bit before with the programming for my majors, but as silly as it sounds, I was a part of the bridge club my freshman and sophomore years of college. It would have ended up longer, but COVID hit, and it was a just a random card game club that the math department hosted. And it was a really fun way to meet a lot of other quirky people. I mean, not that many people, especially our age, play bridge. So it was a little kind of funny, but it was a good way to form kind of a friendship relationship with a lot of the professors as well. So I know that bridge is not for everyone, but something like that is a good example of how you can get your foot in the door and start building those relationships. Besides that, I really got into my research at the Massive Data Institute, which is something I also hinted at before. But that was a very last minute application. I was enjoying my data science internship. So I saw the email like 3 or 4 days before the final application was due and kind of figured, well, I'll throw in an application and try it. And it was one of the most last minute and spur of the moment decisions that I could have made, but probably the most important decision that put me on the path to where I am today, because it introduced me to my advisor. It gave me a taste of research. It introduced me to a lot of different concepts and ideas. So the Massive Data Institute is a part of the McCourt School of Public Policy. And so it has a combination of a lot of data scientists, computer scientists, law, things of that field where they're trying to answer public policy questions with things like social media research. And it was probably the best decision. It was great to join this more pre-professional, not pre-professional is not the right word, but this more intellectual group where I was building my skills and working with other people. And that was fantastic. And then I would say the third thing is because the Massive Data Institute allowed me to develop that relationship with my advisor, Lisa Singh, she started inviting me my senior year to become a more active member of all of the computer science programming, because up to that point I had been more a member of the math groups. And so there was a lot that I did my senior year, which was really fun. Like there's a girls who code club at Georgetown, which I was never very much an active part of until my senior year, where they would throw things like coding parties where you could be a beginner to an advanced coder, and you would go eat pizza, cupcakes, talk with people, and just kind of have fun. And they also had a lot of programming, for example, for Women's History Month, where I was invited because I was close with Lisa to moderate a panel for the female computer science professors. And so that was a really, really enlightening event, not only to go to, but to be a part of. Just to hear the advice that other women in the field have for people like us. Or even there was another panel where the current female PhD students were presenting their research and answering questions about how they got there. And I think that there are a lot of events like that that aren't necessarily well broadcasted. They'd been doing them all 4 years that I'd been there, and I either deleted the emails or never got the emails. And it wasn't until I'd made those connections with people who were organizing them that I got really involved. But those were very helpful to form that network, to ask questions and build that confidence a little bit, see other people who are going through the same thing as I am, and start to understand how I can learn from them, what I can take from their experiences to propel me through my career.
Right. This is really good advice. Um, Next question I have, a little different, but how did your STEM major shape your current position? And do you feel like the majors that you chose were the right ones for you, or would you go back and change anything?
I have no regrets. I so as I mentioned, I came in as a math major to Georgetown because I loved math and I still love math. Um, and I actually did not like computer science. I had taken a computer science class in high school and thought it was one of the worst things ever. But randomly decided to take a class my freshman spring because I thought it would be a good skill to have as a mathematician because right now that's just kind of the way the world is going. And I started and I didn't stop. I kept going. I picked up the second major in computer science and um, that combination I think is really really key to what I'm doing today, obviously as a PhD student in computer science. um, and so there are lots of ways to go about this. I've thought about this a lot, and I think that having that strong math background was or that problem solving background as well has been very very useful to me in my position as a computer science master's student because I think that as much as I love Georgetown for all of the opportunities that they provided, all of the interdisciplinary um, opportunities, particularly that have led me to a PhD program, I think that the comp sci major in and of itself is a little weak on the math. So pairing that with the math side for me has been fantastic and I've loved it. And a lot of what I'm doing right now is a little bit more theoretical, where yes, I am coding, but it's more coding to prove the point. So I'm
Right.
developing a lot of theory that's kind of math heavy, and then the computer science comes secondary. So I have no regrets in terms of what I studied, but it also goes to show that I didn't necessarily know I was going to do computer science when I came into college. It was something I picked up along the way, and it became a passion of mine. So again, just being flexible, being willing to go with the flow, as hard as that is for someone, especially someone like me who is such a perfectionist, has really just shaped and changed the way that I got to where I am today.
Right, right. My next question is, and you kind of touched on this, but how has your gender identity impacted what barriers you faced in pursuing computer science?
Yeah, I would say that that's probably the biggest barrier I faced.
Mhm.
And it's not as much, I've gotten very lucky. I've been very lucky. I've had lots of opportunities growing up. I had a high school that had comp sci classes, for example, where I know not every high school does. And even though I didn't enjoy my computer science classes in high school, they were still there. They were still an option. But it really has forced me to come to terms with the fact that I am smart. I deserve to be here. I am just as good as anyone else in the room, even though I might not look like everyone else in the room. And that has been a big learning curve. And one thing that I didn't anticipate, and I think will impact me a lot going forward, the more I learn, it's really going to be a key factor in my career. And I think naively thought that as long as I could get through it, as long as I could do the classes, that it'd be fine. Like there's no difference between me being a man in computer science. And this is something I don't think is limited to computer science or to STEM, but listening to my female professors, listening to my female PhD students, my peers, it's something we have to think about every day. I mean, just thinking about, for example, how many hours a professor has to put in to their job. It's not a 9 to 5. You're working all day. You're doing research. You're answering emails from students. Something like that's pretty hard to balance if you have a couple kids. So it's something that's going to keep impacting me, but it's been a fun challenge. And one thing that I've taken away from it is that having that support group, that female support group, is really important because even just having allies of other genders, yes, that's absolutely important. That's something that needs to happen if we're going to see any systemic change. But a white man in comp sci is not necessarily going to understand the same barriers that we go through. So being able to have female advisors like my advisor Lisa at Georgetown,
Mhm.
or I purposefully, at the end of the day, it wasn't the deciding factor, but it was a factor, ended up choosing a PhD advisor who's a woman, just because they have a better understanding and um, are more empathetic to the things that you might be going through. And so
Mhm.
I didn't think that I would be this impacted, to be honest with you. I think that was naive. Um, because it's a big factor. I'm not saying that it is going to prohibit me from doing what I want to do, from going into academia by any means, but
Mm.
it's a consideration and it does make it harder. So it's by no means easy.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna conclude with my last question, and that is, what are you most proud of today?
I'm proud that I made it this far. And I'm proud that I was able to let myself change direction and listen to myself when I understood, or when I realized, oh, this is interesting. Maybe I want to do this. Or like allowing yourself to pivot and make those changes is important. And I think so many times we get all this external pressure to stick to this path. You've put in this much work up to this point on math. Why wouldn't you stay with math? Why are you doing computer science? Why a PhD? Why not a master's? It was something I had to really justify, to my parents, to my teachers, to my friends, because like I went through such a 180. It was such a last minute decision, and it ended up being the right one. I'm now, one semester into my PhD, which I know is only one semester out of 5 years, but I can confidently say that I made the right decision. And if you had asked me that 2 years ago, like what are you thinking? What do you want to do? I would have said something completely different. So I'm just really proud that I was able to listen to myself, do that exploration, do that self introspection, and take the steps that were right for me despite what was going on externally. Because there's always so much external noise, there's always so much that people are telling you, but um, at the end of the day, you got to do what's right for you. And if you know what that is, it's easier said than done to know what that is, but I'm really proud that I was able to figure that out and be confident in my decision, because it was definitely not an easy one. So um, I am proud of myself for that.
That's great. Thank you so much for joining us today. This was a really helpful interview.